Ladies and, gentlemen, fellow members, a warm welcome this rather dreich January day. Thank you so much for coming out in numbers. It's lovely to see everyone. A couple of announcements and notices. First of all, we've taken the decision, regrettably, to cancel Saturday's sailing, to give everyone a lot of advance notice. Apparently the forecast is bad, we know that, but there is a fair chance that if you went out, you may not get back, and the club was not particularly prepared to take your expenses for that one, so we've decided to just cancel it, and there'll be notice of a further nominated sailing at some point. In terms of other notices, the next meeting for the club will be Wednesday the 8th of February at 7 o'clock for a start at 7:30. Our speaker will be club member Robert Beale, who brings the average age down in the room quite significantly, to be fair. He's talking to us about commercial boating on Lake Windermere from 1438, that's a very exact date, to 2022. And Robert, as many of you may know, is currently a master on Lake Windermere's fleet of ships. I've been asked by Ian to mention that on the 2nd of February in Partick Church Hall at 7:30, there will be a meeting of the Coastal Cruising Association. And the reason that we want to mention this is that Paul Semple is going to be at that meeting, and there'll be a kind of question and answer session, so it might be quite an interesting meeting for members to attend. I'm told that for a suitable donation, the word actually was appropriate donation, tea, coffee and home baking will be available. So, on to this evening. I first met our speaker this evening on board Waverley in the early 2000s, having already met him virtually on the lamented Clydesight website. Gavin Stewart is the enthusiast's enthusiast, in that he not only talks the talk, but he walks the walk. To that end, he and his wife Sheila were active volunteers in the Waverley work parties, and he took an active interest at committee level in the PSPS. More recently, he is one of 3 volunteer trustees trying to bring back the second Snark back to life. Interestingly, though he enjoys a good counter-stern with the best of them, his main interest is not so much the steamers themselves as what drives them. Maybe that's because he's an electrical engineer to trade and has worked in that capacity for James Howden and Company Limited for 15 years. His product is turbo compressors. He sent me a picture of a turbo compressor, and I have to say I was impressed. I have no idea what it does. I'm sure it's very important, and he maybe tell us more about that later on. But his job,
hoping you'd tell me, Ron.
his job's taken him all over the world: China, Malaysia, India, as well as various countries in Europe and Greenock. For tonight's talk, though, we're not going so far afield. We are actually going as far afield as Greenock. He's taking us on a wee journey down the water from Bridge Wharf as far as Greenock, not Ardrossan. Sorry, I misled you, as I said in my note. As well as his own photographs, he'll be using pictures from the Clyde, James Laments and Joe Macmillan collections, and he has also access to some photographs taken by the late Bobby Sinclair. So, let's sit back and enjoy a peep into the past with Gavin Stewart. Gavin.
I forgot about the counter-stern bit, Roman, thanks for that. Okay, good evening folks. It's been a few years since I've stood up in front of anybody and spoke. The last time was 2019, and we all know what happened the following year. So basically my style of presentation, I'm not going to bombard you with facts and figures. There's more people in the audience know more about that kind of stuff than I do. What I want to try and do is impart my enthusiasm that hopefully concurs with yours for the river down the bottom of the road and what it's given to Scotland over the years. So, peep into the past. Okay, so we're at Bridge Wharf. Now, this is a scene that would be very common back up until about the late 60s maybe. Unfortunately, the landscape has changed a wee bit since then. However, we're not going to focus on that. we'll just go down the water for a wee sail. Now, I was going to say we're on the good ship, save yourselves, but I just thought we'll just move it on. So, just a quick identification of the ships that we have here. Got Laird's Crest, Laird's Loch, Laird's Glen, bit of a theme here, Scottish Coast, and the one that's hiding round the corner there is Deveron. So, I will say there are Clyde steamers in this presentation, do not worry, but there are other things other than Clyde steamers in this presentation also. Like the Comet replica, there we have it. Sadly, she's in no fit state to even be where she is at the moment in Port Glasgow, let alone sailing up the river. So let's hope that somebody sees sense and does something with her sooner rather than later, or she's going to be a total loss. Okay, General Terminus Quay. Well, the younger of us in the audience, notice I actually put myself in that category, will know this more sadly to do with casinos, bowling alleys and cinemas. However, this was where the materials for the Lanarkshire steel industries were offloaded in the upper river up until British Steel Corporation opened Hunterston in the late 70s. When you think about the size of ships that used to come up this river astern, and then you look at the width of the river now, it's hard to believe that that ever happened, but it did. Now we've got one of the, I need to use my pointer, I'm sorry, I know this is just, it's bad presentation etiquette, but there we go. And there's a wee ferry going about its business in the foreground. Fingal. So this is Northern Lighthouse Board tender MV Fingal. This is her having her engines lifted on board under the Sobcross crane. Built by Blythwood Shipbuilding Company in Scotland, and she had British Polar diesels. I'm not 100% sure what this is on the quayside beside her. I don't know if it's boilers or something, but it'll be awaiting another ship to come in and pick them up. The only real bit that still exists there apart from the quayside itself is the crane. She was sold out the fleet and bought by a private owner, and here she's seen laid up in Falmouth Creek about circa 2004, where I don't think she really went many places. She was really on a care and maintenance basis, but I think we can be glad that her owner at the time did the care and the maintenance. And now she's a hotel ship in Leith. Now, this is one of my photos, and my other half and I were very lucky to have one night on her, and I stress one night because it's not cheap. You'll not be going there in your IHG points, put it that way. We had one night on her to celebrate her 50th birthday. The conversion has been done really, really sympathetically, even to the point of the extension aft of our bridge. They followed the same camber of the deck, even the windows on the superstructure follow the camber. Somebody's kind of paid attention rather than just buy an old shipping container and put windows in it and drop it on the back. And also, one of the main things on her is that despite the architect that designed the interiors, who wanted to remove the engines and our other machinery to put more cabins in, the owners resisted, saying that the engines are the heart of the ship and should never be removed. So when you're walking through to your rather large suite, which is at the other end of this walkway, you get a view of the whole engine room. And as you can see, her original engines that we saw in the first photo, well, we didn't see them, but we saw her having them installed, are still in place. And I would recommend, you can go on board without staying, go on for a drink or whatever. The staff are first class. This isn't an advertisement, I don't have shares. But the staff are first class, and they're very enthusiastic about the ship. So it is well worth a visit. Okay, move further downriver, we've got Cunard's Undania. This was built in Port Glasgow in 1960. Cargo passenger steamer, very typical of the kind of time. Rather nice looking ship if you ask me. She was launched in December 59 and lasted to 86. I think that's York Kilkee, I'm not very sure, but and I do believe for the railway buffs in here that there is a Type 4 English Electric Class 40 locomotive in preservation that carries her name to this day. Bartley Curls next. Warunga fitting out. This is one of the parts of the river, I guess, that's kind of not changed that much. That area, that shed's still there, and so's the crane. This ship went to P&O in 1968, but as Robin said, I just like these shots of there were things happening on the river in those days. I'll have a little look into Fairfield's Basin here. This ship on the right is Bibby Line's Lancashire. The one nearest us on the left here is an ex-Anchor Line vessel, and she's being refitted and has just been transferred to Greek ownership. There's a Clyde steamer. I bet you were beginning to get worried, eh? Nice Bobby Sinclair photo here, Elderslie Dry Docks. That's the Duchess of Montrose, and what I think is Clan Cummings sitting in the actual dock. And just to balance it up a little bit, there's our fleet mate, the Hamilton. A little peek into Scots of Bowling now. Now, those of you who have seen me present these photos before will know that there are actually quite a lot of photos in between this, but we wouldn't probably be finished in time to get the first train in the morning home if I showed you everything. So we've got a new build coaster Storm fitting out, and we've got ICI's Lady McGowan on the slip. That's got a connection with me because I served my time at ICI Ardeer. And I can still vaguely remember, I think it was the very last days of the boats coming into the wharf down at Irvine or at Ardeer to take the explosives abroad. And I can also remember the tug Garnet getting the backside blown out her when she was taking explosives out to dump them. And I think somebody forgot to take the detonator out. I don't know what happened, but she was very severely damaged. So, we're into the Laments collection now. These photos came to me in round about 2007. They were rescued from a skip by a security guard at Laments when the place was shutting, and they were given to a person called Brian Climie. I don't know if any of you know him, and he had custody of them until 2007 when I took over the collection. There are quite a few photos, and they've all been professionally taken. And again, I haven't even scratched the surface of what's in that collection. There's a lot of stuff that I've still got to work out. There's a ship launch that to this day I still can't work out what one it is. So here we've got Columba refitting after our war service, and we've got Alexandra Tone's Romsey sitting on the slip. This is the one I had to ask Mr. Quinn about because I wanted some detail. Because this is 1971, round about April, Ian. Yes. With Waverley made a Skelmerley in the slip. Now the reason I needed some information is April 1971. I wasn't born. So quite an atmospheric shot. It's Port Glasgow, so it is probably more than likely raining. So I think later on that year, I think Waverley had a wee mishap and our mast got snapped, but this is the refit before that. Jupiter. So, why are you showing me a picture that I've probably seen a million times? The reason being we're still at Laments, and of course Laments didn't just do overhauls and build new ships. They also refitted them inside. Now this is the 1957 refit of Jupiter's cafeteria. That is absolute Formica heaven. That really, I mean, don't get me wrong, it looks quite nice, but and there's another shot. I think it actually worked out quite well. It looks quite smart. I'm not so sure about the curtains, but I'm not an interior designer. Okay, still with Laments, of course. They built vessels small to large. I'm a particular fan of the mighty tug, small but power packed, and they built quite a few of them. Here's one of them, Steel and Benny Campaigner, 1957. I don't know what it is about these tugs, but even when they're standing still, they still exude power. And the little insert is actually what's on the back of that photo, and that's the launch card for that particular vessel. Okay, a wee bit of a Daft Duck Ferry Fest coming up here. Again, Laments built all 6 of these ships between 72 and 76. This is a shot of call and trials. Now, I work in industry, as a lot of us have or still do. What's that guy doing up at the front? It's kind of, I think, I mean, if she's doing full speed on the river, I mean, who said, right, Davey, on you go up there and fiddle about with something? You know what I mean? It's the 3 of them are doing the normal, the 3 guys on the car deck are doing the normal thing of saying, I don't think Davey should have been up there. Do you think Davey should be up there? And the guy at the back's going, I couldn't give a damn if Davey's went up there, at least it wasn't me. So, now, as you already know, I think pretty much all of these little island class ferries have ended up in service in Ireland. And I remember seeing on Facebook, about August maybe last year, that call had been put into a shipyard in Ireland and had a 3-metre extension inserted into or re-engined and basically refitted for further use. And I don't know if you agree, but I think that's testament to the build quality of that shipyard, that these little ships are of an age that they're still viable to spend that kind of money on without actually buying a new boat. I don't think Davey's still up there, mind you. So hopefully they got him down. Maybe he isn't doing anything, maybe he's actually hanging on for dear life. And there she is as she is today, still doing what she was built to do. There's Rum, another trial shot. Must have been Davey's day off that day because he's not up in the... And Egg on trials as well. It would be many, many more years before she would become Calmac's only tall ship with her nice bridge extension. And there she is getting into the water. Have she still got the same... I know she's away to Ireland as well, isn't she? Has she still got the same elevated bridge set up? Or, yeah. Right, I don't think this one needs much introduction, but I'll need to slow down or I'll be finished before 8 at this rate. I don't think I need to tell you what that is. The Streakers are one of my favourite boats. I know that's probably sacrilege in front of a lot of you good people, but they did what they said in the tin for in excess of 40 years. I bet they paid their owners back. Alec, you're smiling Riley in the background there. Very manoeuvrable, and actually just generally, I think, quite good looking boats. That's her getting in 1973. There we go. I always thought she looked awful bald without the flying bridge. And also the Guruk Dunoon ferry thing was kind of restricting her use a little bit, because that would have confused the hell out of folk if they went to Rossi. What's the Guruk Dunoon ferry coming here for? And there's some trial shots of her. Smart looking boat. And Davy couldn't get up the top of that mast either. So, what was that? Jerry picker job or yard crane? Right, Andrew, you asked the question. There you go, you've got your answer. Of course I'm going to show that photo. I'm never going to present these laments photos without that one in, because it's a very similar photo to the one I just showed you, but it's in colour, and also Juno was launched with the flying bridge fitted. Now, before we go any further, in these days of health and safety, as you can see, the bonnet and the bowler hat, they're quite good safety measures in those days, because nothing's going to fall off the cranes and hit the guys because they've got their hats on. To say it beggars belief is not fair, because it's a different time. That was what you did, but and I think that might actually be egg building to the left there. But I think that's a particularly good photo. And so's this, back to black and white, but we're still painting the route on the side of the boat. It's one of these, I think only black and white photography can do that if you get the light the right way. That I think that's quite an evocative trial shot of that ship. And I think if it had been in colour, you'd have lost some of the mood. And it actually looks quite sunny, so it probably wasn't raining that day. Now, as we know, Juno and Jupiter are no longer with us, but I was very happy to see on social media a few weeks ago that Saturn, now renamed Orion with an extension onto her stern, is I think about to go into service for our new Greek owners. So I'm a frequenter of Orkney, as you are, Robin, and it did pain me sometimes to arrive on the ferry at St Margaret's Hope and see that boat lying, usually high and dry, thinking there's got to be something better for her. I had a tour round her when she was in Roseneath before Seamal sold her, and she was okay. She'd been laid up for a few years, but she still looked like she had a bit of life in her. But I'm just an electrician, what do I know? Okay, the harbour in Port Glasgow, this no longer exists. We drive over the top of it. So this is Gothenburg's steamer SS Horsa, looking like she's preparing to enter the Port Glasgow dry dock, which again's under the road now, while Jura in the background looks like she's just come out. Safety flat bonnets there again. Okay, we got to Garvel, and this is Loch Seaforth. Now, this is where I stopped, because I thought I could take you all the way to Troon with that photo collection. I could actually end up in Aberdeen as well, because for some reason in the whole biscuit tin of medium format negatives that is the Clyde collection, there is the absolute EU mountain, am I still allowed to say that, of fishing boat pictures. But I'm not going to do that, so sigh of relief for the back of the room there. Instead, that's a very brief peep into the past on the river, but maybe we'll have a peep into my past, only the bits I want you to know, of course.
Careful, Gavin.
I know. See, I had words with Mr. Tomlinson before we started this about heckling, but there he just couldn't help himself. Okay, so now, as Robin said, there was a web forum in the early 2000s started called Clydesight, I can't remember how I found it in the net. Because at that point in time, I was living in Greenock, but I was still shipping-wise what you would call a liner guy. So it was all about Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, Aquitania, Lusitania, these kind of ships. However, Clydesight, because of the people that posted on it, started to change my outlook a bit. I started to get my head down and actually learn a bit about the river that has basically been, within sight my whole life. Being brought up in West Kilbride, I wasn't that far away from it, and the river is down the bottom of my road in Greenock. So, having said that, the first photos I show you are of a liner. However, Clydesight didn't just start to bring like-minded people together and educate liner guys like me that there were other things in the world like tugs. It also brought a load of like-minded people together. And one of the first excursions that was organised was to meet and greet SS Norway for our final visit to the Clyde. She'd just come across the Atlantic, during which time the horrible atrocities that was 9/11 had happened. And she arrived on the Clyde on a very cold morning of 14th September 2001. Clyde Marine very kindly put on the cruiser to take a small contingent of us out to meet her coming in, and that top left photo was one of the pictures I took that morning. It was absolutely freezing, and I mean freezing, but it was worth it for a sunrise and a silhouette like that. Now that was taken with a conventional film camera and a cheap scanner, which is why it's not a particularly good resolution, so I apologise for that. But this one is better with the sun on her. She might have had all this additional steelwork added up top and aft, but you can still see what she was. She may have had her two wing screws removed to reduce her top speed to 22 knots, but that is a transatlantic liner. And she was due, I think, to be sold off to Malaysia as a casino ship, but because of the demand, NCL kept her. But unfortunately in Miami, I think it was 2003, she suffered a boiler explosion which sadly killed some crew members and injured others, and after that her fate was sealed. So that was the first Clydesight outing, and that was where I started to meet up with people. Well, you weren't there that morning, Robin, but I don't think you could manage out your bed or something, I can't remember what it was. I'm not going to get asked back, am I?
That you plan?
Other things that brought Clydesight together, we got to say farewell to what was a very fondly thought of ship, Pioneer. That was the one only time I was ever on that ferry, was the alleged last cruise that Calmac put on. But I think maybe not while we were out on the cruise, but very shortly thereafter, the then new Carusk dumped one of her azipods in the mud at Mallaig, and Pioneer was called to the rescue. That was the bridge that day. It was now where did we go? Getting Guruk through the Narrows, and then I think went down Largs, was it? Yeah, and then came up to, because the next one is her alongside at Graham's hometown. But that was a great day. And again, it gave me a flavour for the kind of community that existed that I didn't know about. Klansmen. This is when I started getting into, I suppose people might call it nutter mode. So when there were ships arriving on the river for whatever reason, Gav would be out with the camera, pretending to his boss that he was working from home. Was he heck? He was down at Ferguson's taking photos of Klansmen. That's 2004 when she arrived to have that upper deck added aft. I don't know. Did Hebrides didn't come out with that, did she? Did she not? Did she get it added as well? So, story to tell you about Klansmen. It was a CRSC charter. Some of you might have been there. I can't remember what year it was. It was one of the years where she was covering for the Calais Isles on overhaul, and we'd been round Arn, and we were then on the actual service run back from Brodick to Ardrossan. It was a cold, dark night, funnily enough, and all of a sudden, I remember, and I'm not going to get too graphic here, but I remember I had to go to the loo. And I left my other half, Sheila. Some of you know her, some of you don't. She's a 4'10" kind of pint pot person, but don't cross her. That's why I've got very little hair now. I went off to the loo, and as I was standing up in the cubicle to come out, somebody threw the helm hard over, and Clansman turned round and started getting back the way she came. And I went back up on deck to find Sheila gone. Now, somebody jumped overboard, which, you know, is always a sad thing, that if you ever get to a stage that's your only way out. However, the crew swept into action. They asked for a doctor. Sheila was a doctor, so before I know it, Sheila's in the survival suit, which is about 5 times too big for her, and in the fast rescue craft getting lowered into the water, because ship that size, in the dark, the crew had found the guy, and they put the ship in, they put the rib in the water, they pulled him out. Sheila got him back, and the helicopter from HMS Garnet came over and took him to hospital. Now, sadly, Sheila had contacts. Sadly, the guy succeeded in his quest a few months later, but that night he didn't. But the thing that impressed me the most was the reaction of the crew, and that's why it annoys me a little bit when the crew gets so berated sometimes on social media about the things that they do. There's not many people can do that, can find somebody my size in the water in the dark night in January from a ship that size. So, but the main point of my story, and I'm getting to it, is this is the first of a few times where I have to go and buy my coffee in the coffee cabin while Sheila's enjoying a cup of tea with the skipper on the bridge. You know? So, but yeah, that was the first of a few times that happened. Lord of the Isles and the Sound of Mull as well, that went to the aid of a dive vessel, and diver had got the bends. And again, it wasn't the loo this time, I'd actually went to the shop, and then the call goes out for the doctor, and I go, here we go again. And yes, she was survival suit on again. It was only 3 times too big this time, but she wasn't needed because the Tobermory lifeboat got out before. So Lottie just lay off to give the dive boat some shelter while they got the guy off. 2004, ferry hop. You're gonna hear and see a wee bit of my partner in this, because at this time we were just, it was 24/7 Clydesight. We do this, we do that. Sheila had this idea for a ferry hop. We got up one morning having a cup of coffee, and Sheila said, I've got an idea, which usually means we're going to decorate something, or however, the idea was very good. And she said, let's go to Ardrossan one Saturday, and let's get on at Ardrossan, and then use as much as possible shipping to get us up into Glasgow. And I thought, okay. So this is where Ferry Hop 2004 came from. We started in Ardrossan, got the Caledonian Isles over to Brodick. Now, before we go any further, the reason we've got these tickets is Bill Main, I think, was marketing manager of Calmac at that time. He's also a member of Clydesight, and we got special tickets. Now, to my eternal regret, I took a photo of them, but I never retained any. Yeah, can't get the staff. Anyway. Now, Calais Isles, bridge visits on all the boats, even Isla Cumbria. That was a bit of a squash because there was 20 of us. This is Sheila. Steering, I say in inverted commas because it's a push button, the Calais Isles on the way over to Brodick. Now, not just the people on the bridge, but I'm sure the normal passengers thought lives would be lost that day, because I've never seen such a wavy wake in my life. So there we all are on Waverley later in the day. So Cally House to Brodick, bus to Lochranza, over to Clonig, onto the wee post bus or whatever it is. We stopped to see the Heb Isles leaving, going to Isla, and then round to Tarbert, across to Port of Addy. Sheila had chartered a little minibus that took us to Tinnabruich. We'd phoned up the Tinnabruich Hotel previous to that and said, we've got 20 plus people coming Saturday, the blah blah blah. Can you serve us lunch? I don't know, they said. I said, why not? Waverley comes in that day. I said, I just told you we'd be in before Waverley, but Waverley comes in that day. So, cut a long story short, because that call went on quite a while just with that ping pong. We did go to the Tinnabruich Hotel and we did get some lunch, and Waverley did come in as well, which was quite good because we were getting on her, so I was quite glad she came in that day. So, wee Jeff's bus, and I tell no lie, that was the wee minibus from Port of Addy to Tinnabruich. We got on Waverley. That's where the man there, Mr. McCrory, because I didn't know the now legend that is Jim McFadden at the time, but we got a special price. Paul Semple's not in the audience, has he? We got a special price from Waverley that day for our tickets, because we then got Waverley all the way to Dunoon. We got off at Dunoon, then we all nearly get cowed onto our backsides because Saturn landed a bit heavily in the pier behind us. We got on Saturn, Waverley left for Helmsburgh. We got on Saturn, over to Gourock, ran, got on the train. Now we'd waved Jim McFadden goodbye at that point. On the train to Greenock Central Station, 20 plus piles off the train, sprints down to Custom House Quay just in time to meet Waverley coming back with a purser standing in the paddle box just shaking his head going, I don't think he had any words that day. Neither did we, because I was absolutely knackered while they were running. So we got on Waverley again from Custom House Quay and got her up to Anderson Quay at that time, so that's where she was still berthing up there at that time. This is a snapshot of the squad. There were a few more that aren't actually in this photo, and there's the culprit of the bridge visits and the special tickets sitting in the blue jacket in the middle in the top row beside Sheila. It was a great day. That was the weather. It might not have been quite so great if it had been raining, but who cares? That was Ferry Hop 2004, and it was a good wee day. We've never repeated it again, but I don't know if people would really be up for doing something like that, you know, running for Greenock. So you would, yeah. I should have said normal people. So there we go. Another thing, 2005, Shield Hall came back to the river for her 50th, and there she is beside the rather new looking butte. And of course in the RSPB charter she called it Fairley. The Rothsay one I think would have been the CRSC one, I think. The thing that I used to love about the Shield Hall was when she was approaching the pier, you knew you had a lot of time, because she took quite a while, you know. Because obviously that ship was not built to be calling at piers all over the place. That wasn't what it was. The thing that really got me about that ship was when you got right up forward, how quiet it was. She just used to glide through the water, and you could go anywhere. You know, you could go up and ask the skipper what he'd had for his dinner or whatever. I don't know if they still let people on the bridge now. Are they allowed to anymore?
No, they still do.
Do they?
And the boiler room.
I mean, the engine room itself was just a working museum of Clydeside Industries. It was amazing. And there's a few of us Clydesighters there. And one of the things that I was very chuffed was that I got asked to take the crew photo, and there it is. Now, I think pretty much all of that crew were volunteers. So that was a good wee adventure for them, and it was a different ship for us to sail on in the summer of 2005. Will we see her back in the river again? I don't know. Not with the price of fuel anyway. Okay, So that's a few snapshots of the kind of things that we're getting up to. But you will have noticed until now that a certain ship hasn't appeared in the scene. Here she is. This is June the 14th, 2003. I'd said to Sheila, Waverley's back from our phase 2 rebuild. Why don't we see if we can get tickets for the first cruise? And she said, okay. This was it. So, first cruise, public cruise after the rebuild. Jumps on board, up the starboard side at the bow, and then witnessed what was a fight ensuing on the quayside. There's a couple of people with dogs. Anybody remember that? Ian, come on, you must remember that, sure. Was it you that was fighting? I can't remember. No. But, you know, they kissed and made up before we sailed. But so this was the start of something for us, but that day we had no idea how much of a something it was going to be. And actually, if I go back, that looks like toilet doors on the quayside as well. Later that year, we reopened Loch Ranza. I don't know if we can call that a pier, it was jetty, quay, I don't know. Another, see what I was saying to some people I was with earlier, we did just about every Sunday sailing in subsequent seasons, where she went from Greenock to or Glasgow, we got on at Greenock to Loch Ranza. It could be raining cats and dogs, you get to Loch Ranza and the sun would be out. The sun always shines on Loch Ranza, we said. And we would go to the Loch Ranza hotel, and we kind of got to realise that the proprietor of said hotel was easily wound up, shall we say. So we would always go and ask for 4 Magners and a pint of Best or something like that, knowing full well that it was only Bulmers he sold, and that really wound them up. To the point of he would go, it's not Magners, it's Bulmers. And then one Sunday afternoon, a tourist was coming in, and he shouted at her, stopped pouring the pint and shouted over, you're coming in the wrong door. You know, this is somebody who could be giving them money. And then refused to fill another tourist's flask with cold water out the tap, but despite the fact that the queue from Waverley was out the door, so he made a lot of money out of us. But he was, we used to call him the happy barman. I did dare Stuart Mears one time to go up and ask for an umbrella in his Bulmers, but I thought that might put the guy over the edge. And that. So here we are, first time heaving line ashore at Loch Ranza in June 2003, and there she is. Work parties. We started, Sheila and I went along to work parties at the start of 2004. Look, there's me in the middle with the coffee cup. I've not changed a bit, have I? You weren't meant to laugh. So, this is a few years later, but it gives you an idea. We walked on in January 2004, and that was us until about, I don't know, work parties 2010, I think, when we bought a house and we were trying to get everybody in the work parties in Waverley to come and finish our house, but it wasn't happening. But another great community, a few Clydesighters. There's Mr. McCrossan, that's a very fetching beanie hat you've got on. That. But these work parties made you feel part of something, made you feel that you felt like you were achieving something. And the greatest thing ever was when the ship sailed down the river for the first time that season. And you knew that you'd had a hand in doing something. Didn't need the slap in the back, just apart from the fact that the first time I went down the river after our work party, we were going to Western Isles, and the deckies for some reason had hosed down the hand dryers and the gents loose. I spent probably to Campbellton changing fuses. So, and in those days the ship often sailed with one alleyway shut off, because such as the way things had been, it had been last minute with some jobs and they hadn't had a chance to clear the ship properly. That would be done during the, because the engineers of the time always regarded the Oban run as a light run, even though for when we did it in 2004, I think we had about 350 folk on. If that's a light run, then that was the sail. I've got a photo somewhere of that somebody's taken of me standing looking at the ship, waiting to get on to sail at 7 o'clock, and Sheila sleeping in my shoulder. So. Yes, rounding the mull. This was we'd heard this. This was tales of folklore, and that year, that first year we did it, we got a nice heavy swell. So there was a group of us up the forward end, actually leaning over the rail just a little bit, and you could actually see the forefoot come out of the water at times, and then she would go back down, and we're whooping and screaming like wains at this. However, it wasn't so funny for a man, and I hope he's not in the room. Why do I always say it? I went in to do the loo. This is about the third time I've said this tonight. Now, you know the portholes, which you can see, which are generally open. There's a guy standing at one of the portholes. I went in, and she took a bigger one than that, green, straight in the porthole, washed the guy's beanie hat off onto the floor, soaked him, to which she said, oh, and I'm not going to repeat what it was. And so I left the loo to him wringing his hat out into the sink, murmuring to himself, and then I went to the bar, and I happened to come down the forward staircase a bit later, and the guy had just come out. He'd been using the hand dryers to dry himself, and then she took another wave in through that door, and it happened again. So needless to say, I thought it would probably be better for my continuous existence to turn around and go back up onto deck again, because, sorry, but I did just want to laugh. I know it was unfortunate for the guy, but. And as you can see, I did sneak down and take a photo of the rather wet deck just to prove it later, but I wasn't even going to attempt a photo of the guy, because I think he would have probably I'd have been wearing my camera, I think. But getting round them all on Waverley with that kind of swell was great. And then Oban North Pier the following morning. That was a 10-day excursion, so we visited a lot of places. I think we went, did we go to Tyree that year? I remember we've been to Staffahoner, Tyree, Iona. It was a great, we spent the whole 10 days following the ship about. I can remember when I went into the shower when I got home, I was still going like that. Because you really get to experience how a paddle steamer handles an open sea when you get up there. And to be fair to her, she's not that bad. Fort William, which I understand now can't call that anymore. That was the one where there is a story, I don't know if it's true, that they managed to get the heaving line in through the ladies' toilet window of the restaurant or something like that. I don't know if it's... But another real, a lot of people say this, but I fully agree with them. Waverley really looks, I think, almost at her best when she's in the Western Isles. She just looks right up there. And of course, I had to go and try and reproduce the photo that's in the lower bar when we got to Portree. We were staying in that self-catering accommodation there. We annexed the whole place. There was about 7 of us. And the crew that night, and they're walking up to the pub, we had our guitars and the windows open, so we serenaded them on the way up, and then we serenaded them on the way down again. But that was I think we went, I don't know if we, I can't actually recall what cruises we did there, but it was just a great time. It was, what's going to happen next. It was great. And there is Ian, what's that guy's name? I can't remember now. Yeah. And the rope dogs, as Sheila calls them. He's no longer with us, is he?
Passed away a few years.
But again, another great week in an action shot. And a bit out of sync, but that's Waverley sitting at the layover at Port Ellen, which in subsequent years she didn't do a great deal, to be honest. I think they ended up just aborting it and using Collinsy instead latterly, I think. Other things that happened during our time with the ship got our bus pass, turned 60. And we actually, by this time, I'd been asked on to the PSPS Scottish Branch Committee in 2005. Sheila was subsequently asked on in 06. And we'd actually wanted to present the ship with a big, you know how you get these big fake cheques? We wanted to present the ship with a fake bus pass. But the current skipper at the time, Luke Davis, said, funny though that may be, there'll be some people that will see that photo and think you can use your bus pass on Waverley, so please don't do it. So, but in every sailing area that year they had a flag. This was the Western Isles one, and the competition was, can you guess roughly how much a ton of fuel would be and make a donation? And the closest got the flag. We put in £240 and we got the flag, and we thought that was expensive for fuel back in those days, but I have no idea what they were paying per tonne last year. And that's the then WSN chairman and fellow committee member Ian MacLeod grimacing probably because like, oh god, did it have to be two committee members that won this? This looks like a fix. But that flag will never ever leave our possession. And why am I not working? Right, we'll just do it the conventional way. The whole trip was just punctuated by views like this. This is round Ardnamurchan and into the top of the Sound of Mull, charging down. This was the position and run from Kyle to Tobermory, into Tobermory, where we nearly get trampled by the crew to get into the Mishnish. And it was just great. I mean, that kind of thing, you know, it was quite warm that night, the sun's setting, and you turn around to yourself and you think, there's not many people get to do this, and there aren't. And you know, if you ever get if there's anybody in this room that hasn't done it, do it. 2004, I mean, we've done transatlantics and Queen Mary 2, we've done cruises, but that 2004 holiday in the Western Isles with Waverley was one of the best holidays ever for us. Also, getting involved with the crew and getting to know them meant that this one was the first of many Sheila birthday celebrations in the lower bar. It was normally the sailing before Kyle Games, so that's why the photo's a bit dull there, but on the left hand side there's actually a whole stack of cans and everything all ready for what we fondly came to call the cattle run. But there's Sheila with her cake, which would be smuggled on at Largs, so she didn't know, but she did know, because we did it about 7 times. I mean, you're surely going to know eventually. But it's just a you know, I think it was Craig Peacock at the time as the chief steward, and he was a great guy, and he would just basically close the bar for 20 minutes till we cut the cake and had a laugh, had a couple of bottles of champagne, and it was just great times. I know I keep saying that, but it was. And then 2005 also, I was privileged, and I mean that, to be able to do the light run from our berth up in Glasgow to Garville Dry Dock. This was the year that they were replacing the port paddle shaft that hadn't been done during the rebuild. I don't know if it was time or money or both that prevented it. So basically, as soon as she was docked down, the boilers were blown down. The port paddle drum top got burnt off, the platform got taken off and the wheel removed, and the shaft was fitted. That was quite a long visit to dry dock. She arrived there, I think, mid-March, and I don't think she came out until about mid-May. There's some work party people staring at the wheel with the new shaft fitted, and as a guy I used to work with many years ago in one of my jobs said, that's a good example of burn your way in, weld your way out. So basically you'll probably still see the marks of that actually on the, and saying that wheel's been out since, sadly, because they did have issues with the taper on the shaft. And finally we found Sheila a brush that was the right length. Look, because all the other ones were away up in the Rockster. So, but that was the bottom of the dry dock in 2005. Just a wee bit of hilarity. And you know, the only place we could get a Dickies boiler suit that would fit Sheila was in Highland Industrial Supplies in Inverness, and it's a kids one, so they employ slave labour up there, people. You heard it here first. Accelerate. That year we were the ship was running out of time. She needed to go almost straight back into service after she came out the dock. Normally our work parties would be a Saturday and we'd all go home and come back the following Saturday. But at that point it was whenever somebody had time off work, or as it was in the last weekend, we just pulled a couple of 12-hour shifts, did what needed to be done, kept out the way of the crew that needed to be doing things that we either couldn't do, shouldn't be doing, or whatever. There's work party and friend Alistair Black. That's probably a very common view of his behind bars, but anyway, that's one of the bars off the fondly called grip bins that had just been repainted. There's Sheila touching it up after Alistair had scraped it, putting it back in. And I know I keep going on about this, but 4'10" and lit a Duracell because she repainted the whole of that upper engine room herself during work parties in 2005, swinging for the roof and harnesses and all sorts of stuff. Me, I'm frightened of heights, you'll not get me near that kind of thing, I'm not swinging above that. And of course, that dry dock visit, this appeared behind us. The Renfrew ferry went in for a refit. Waverley sailed in serenely. However, this thing limped in with 6 pumps spewing water all over the place. And it took, Gordon Reid told me it took 3 days for the water to stop running out our bottom. And then some poor gavel guy or a squad of them had to weld up all the rivets underneath. I mean, so she got all these abominations put on her. Actually, they turned it in, when it was finished, they turned it into quite a nice venue. However, I remember also Gordon getting worried because he says, if that piece falls apart, we're never going to get out this dock. Because they'd put Waverley in front, obviously. But thankfully for us, she was fit to float, and we got back out. As you can see, it's high tide there. It gives you quite a perspective on how much water those dock gates are holding back, or not holding back sometimes, as the case may be. 2005, the ship reopened Blairmore Pier. We bought a plank, and that's the plaque that I think's still there. I've not been on Blairmore Pier for a while. Another great day. We brought the new year in 2005 into 2006, I think, because at that time Agnes that owned the pier, the old ticket office was a self-catering cottage. So we basically got the key off on the PSPS Christmas charter that year, and then went over and brought in the new year and Blairmore Pier House. However, the weather was really bad that night, and actually the water got so high that it was almost in danger of coming up and into the house. But then about half an hour before the wind turned and all the water disappeared. And we were able to, because one of the things I'd wanted to do was pop a cork into the river at midnight. When we did it, of course, Alistair Black, the comedian that he is, says, I think you just smashed one of the windows on the Millport ferry. There we go. Also, 30 years of WSN, and there's the 3 protagonists there. I think that cruise, we went up Loch Long, but obviously we weren't able to call it a Drishig at that time, which I understand's changed now. And yes, work parties 2006. I'll hurry up, Robin, don't worry.
No, don't panic.
This happened. Toilet pan. This was the first of 2 winter work parties that I would spend in the toilets in this ship. Not because I was seasick, because she wasn't going anywhere, but the rebuild was an absolute triumph, do not get me wrong. However, there were a few things that were a wee bit strange. Now, what's the easiest way to to wash down Waverley's gents' toilets and the ladies is with a hose. So what you don't do is put the flushing system for the toilet under the pan and then apply 230 volts to it, because when said decky washes down said pans and floor, said decky gets belt. So, and the engineers were getting wee tingles off it as well when they were having to work on the systems. So Kenny had this plan to convert it to 12 volts during the winter. So I did the gents one winter. I can remember sitting up in Thurso. I was doing a job with the company I was working for. We were subcontractors to Scottish Water, and I was sitting in my hotel at night with a control panel on the dressing table in the hotel, wiring up the panel for Waverley's blinking toilet flushing system. We did the ladies the following year, and also Kenny Henderson was great. He could always come up with these really great ideas like, they bloody men keep forgetting to flush the loo. So we put a PIR sensor, I don't know if it's still there, but it could sense right across all the cubicles. So every time it triggered, it would set a timer off. So if the guy didn't flush the loo, there was a solenoid that would bypass the button and it'd flush it anyway, but I don't know if that's still there. So 2006 and 2007 was toilet time in Waverley, but again, great laugh. And we got the job done, we got the ship out again, and of course 2006 also got to do that. A wee bit of Glasgow stopping the whole of London, yahoo. In fact, the following year we were on the viewing gallery when she went through and we're videoing her, and Jim McFadgen comes on the tannoy and goes like, "Hello Alistair, hello Gavin, hello Sheila," and everybody's looking about as we're laughing. It was just brilliant. And sunset over the gasworks further down the river's lovely as well of an evening. But the Thames is just a different thing. You see Canary Wharf about 50 times. The bend in the river you see at the end of EastEnders is. So we're getting to the end. This isn't too bad, Roman, on the boat. You don't need to use the boat hook after all. This is the second snark, and a maid. Now I think this is Rossi. I think the second snark's come in off tendering duties, having a wee rest. That's her in pretty much as-built condition. I don't know what maid that is, I'm afraid. Sorry guys, I can't zoom in on the live ring enough. I think somebody did identify it for me years ago, but I can't remember. So really, I hope you've taken something from this, and I hope that you get a feel for how I feel about shipping on the river. As I said, not a facts and figures guy, just an enthusiast that just loves being on the water, loves learning about the things, especially the engineering side. And Billy, if we eventually get a break, I want to be doing that again very soon. So there we go, folks.
Well done. Gavin, thank you so much. I knew you were going to be great, and I did say here's a guy that walks the walk, not just talks the talk, and with all the voluntary work you do, the communities you talked about there, the shipping that we saw, and your work on Waverley, and also hopefully your work on the second snark. Thank you so much. Just loved it. It's really great. Thanks so much.
I love
great
doing
fun. That's us, guys. Thanks very much indeed for your attendance tonight. And we'll see you. We won't see you this weekend, sadly, but we will see you hopefully next month when Robert Peel will be here. Thank you so much. Cheers.